the love story is between Calvin and Elizabeth is really just the kicking off point for Elizabeth Zott to let down her guard and ultimately open up her heart to a whole host of other kinds of love stories.
Hello, how are we today?
Doing well.
Great.
Love your background.
Thank you, and I have loved your show.
Thank you.
Lee, I know that Bonnie served as a co-executive producer on this. What was that collaboration process with her like to achieve this transformation to the screen?
From the moment I came aboard, I just started talking to Bonnie, and I talked to her about what I loved so much about her book, which was basically every single word of it, and then what I felt were opportunities to change things. And from the beginning, Bonnie was very clear with me that, you know, she understood that an adaptation is just that. It is not someone reading her book aloud on screen. And, you know, I think that there was such an opportunity. You know, there would be times where there'd be the mention of a little piece of Elizabeth's backstory that it was like, oh, what if we saw all of that? Or a paragraph that would talk about, you know, two friends, you know, being pen pals, or two unlikely, you know, people being pen pals, that I was like, oh, that could be episode 7 of the show. And I think she was incredibly open to that. And, you know, really the most important thing for her, the two most important things for Bonnie, in my recollection, were, one, getting the science right. And we spent a lot of time working at that. And we had science consultants reading the scripts and being with us on set to make sure that even the experiments that they were conducting were accurate. And we talked a lot about the character of 630, who, from, you know, the hundreds of interviews and Zooms and book fairs and festivals that Bonnie had attended, 630 was such a beloved character, and we really worked hard to service him, knowing the limitations of actually using a real dog and not a dog that was just pen on paper.
Well, I think you did a great job, because I was going to say 630 is probably my favorite character.
Oh,
so
amazing.
630 is going to win all the awards.
He's going to win all the awards.
Sarah, you really get to set the tone for the whole show with the first 2 episodes, and part of that is really situating it in time and place. What were the most challenging aspects of that? Because we have such a modern woman, but the time period really has to push against her.
Knowing that this was a period piece set in the 1950s, we wanted to make sure cinematically that you feel like it's a world that you can get lost in, that doesn't just feel like a stereotype of the 1950s. We wanted it to feel like a contemporary story. And I think, you know, that's one of the reasons the book has resonated for so many people, is that even though it's about a woman experiencing these obstacles in the 1950s, especially, you know, in America, there's a lot of progress we still need to make today. So it's still very relevant. And so, yeah, tonally and cinematically, we wanted to, particularly with our lighting and the way that we were framing things, we wanted to add a bit of naturalism, a bit of grit, a bit of texture, so that you felt you were invited into Elizabeth's world rather than just like flipping through the 1950s catalog.
Speaking of Elizabeth and her world, how early on did you know that it would be Brie Larson? And why must it be Brie Larson? She is amazing, but why do you think she's amazing?
There could have been no one else.
Really could have been no one else. The evolution of this project is Brie Larson brought it to us, not the other way around. I think for both me and Sarah, you know, with our other projects, you know, you develop something for years and years, and then you hope that, you know, Brie Larson's agent takes a look at it, and then, you know, that's the process. And with this, Brie Larson controlled the project along with Jason Bateman and his producing partner, Michael Costigan. And so rather than us casting Brie Larson was actually casting us. And, you know, I remember Zooming with Brie for the first time, and I was auditioning. I was basically telling her what my vision is and the way that I approach the show and the way I would kind of, you know, tonally and, you know, episodically and all of that thematically. And she was ultimately the decider, not the other way around.
It's a mark of Brie's intelligence that she identified this material and this character to play, because there's so much about Brie Larson that is like Elizabeth Zott and vice versa, actually. Brie is just so incredibly smart, very, very logical, extremely hardworking. And I suspect like Elizabeth Zott, she's someone who often, because she's happens to be a beautiful woman, doesn't always get taken seriously intellectually. And so I think there was so much that Brie could pull from and play with there.
In the first 2 episodes, you get to tell like a whole love story that resonates throughout the rest of the show, but also cannot overshadow Elizabeth's own personal journey. So how do you achieve that balance and bring out the best chemistry with Brie and Lewis?
I wanted to feel absolutely in the moment and very much in the story as we were going. So we treated each moment as if it were forever. But ultimately, this is a story that is about many different kinds of love stories. It's about many different kinds of chemistries between people and relationships and constellations of communities. And so the love story is between Calvin and Elizabeth is really just the kicking off point for Elizabeth Zott to let down her guard and ultimately open up her heart to a whole host of other kinds of love stories.
Absolutely. And then Lee, can you talk about the character of Harriet and kind of weaving her story in through the background at first and then coming more into prominence when she gets closer to Elizabeth?
So the character of Harriet was, was one of the main characters in the book. And one of the first conversations I had with Bonnie was talking about changing Harriet and making it a black female lawyer, who lived in this community called Sugar Hill. And we had an historical consultant named Dr. Shamel Bell. And we spoke really, tirelessly with her to make sure that we got the story right. And it felt really interesting to us to have a story that in some ways paralleled Elizabeth's story. And then as the story goes on, someone who kind of appears in the background and has a little bit of a relationship with Calvin that as the season goes on, you learn a little bit more about, that the two stories dovetail. And that was very intentional. And Asia Naomi King, who plays Harriet, is such an incredible actress and is scene stealing to me. Mm-hmm. And to tell that story, we're watching Elizabeth's story as a white woman in a white male dominated field of chemistry, and her feeling marginalized and her, pushing up against a patriarchy and the sexism in the office, and to see the same story play out, but on a much more personal level, because Harriet is it's a story of survival and of saving her community. And what is it like for her also to be marginalized? There weren't that many, the proportion of female lawyers back then was different. And then to add the component of race to it, to be a black lawyer that's a woman at that time, that's pushing up against a racist bureaucracy that's trying to put a freeway through her neighborhood and ultimately destroy it and kind of, cause the entire community to disperse, was something that we really wanted to explore, and how Elizabeth and Harriet are both there for each other and sometimes aren't on the same page. And that was a friendship that felt really honest and interesting for us to explore.
And it was a friendship that had to be earned.
Yes.
And it gave our Elizabeth, our heroine, somewhere to grow, too. She is also flawed and also has blind spots and didn't even see her own privilege, where she might be worried about, career advancement. And as Lee said, Harriet's worried about not losing her home.
Well, you guys did an amazing job. Thank you so much. I love the show. I cannot wait for everyone else to join me.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.